For 3 years, I believed my son-in-law had sacrificed everything to care for my daughter after she mysteriously lost her memory. During another neurologist appointment, he stepped outside to take a phone call. The doctor immediately locked the door and whispered, "Your daughter isn't mentally ill. Someone is deliberately hurting her. Get her away from her husband now." Seconds later, the door opened. My son-in-law walked in, smiling, holding the cream he claimed was her treatment and had personally applied to her skin every single day. "Thank you for being here. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever trusted someone completely only to realize something was wrong? Drop a comment and let me know. Your stories mean more than you think. Quick note, some details have been fictionalized for storytelling. What matters most is the lesson this story carries." The doctor's face had gone completely pale, and she was whispering 5 words that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my daughter's illness. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Howard Myers. I'm 68 years old, a retired chemical engineer who spent 35 years working with pharmaceutical compounds. I thought I understood how the world worked. I thought I could recognize danger when I saw it. I was wrong. The morning started like every other medical appointment over the past 3 years. December 20th, 2025. Cold Portland rain streaking the windows of Providence Medical Center. I'd driven my daughter Briar to the 4th-floor neurology clinic because she couldn't drive herself anymore. She sat beside me in the wheelchair, 35 years old, staring at nothing. Once she'd been the vibrant founder of an organic cosmetics company her late mother had built from scratch. Once she'd filled rooms with laughter and plans and impossible energy. Now she was a silent shell, her hands trembling in her lap, her eyes vacant. My son-in-law Caspian stood beside the wheelchair, wearing an immaculate navy suit and that patient smile I'd grown so grateful for over the years. At 38, he looked every bit the devoted husband who had sacrificed his chemical engineering career to care for his sick wife. His hand rested protectively on Briar's shoulder. "Thank you for seeing us, Dr. Gomez," Caspian said smoothly as we entered the examination room. Dr. Iris Gomez, a 45-year-old neurologist with sharp, observant eyes and graying temples, gestured for us to sit. She'd been reviewing blood work from Briar's previous doctors, and her expression had grown darker with each page. "Mr. Myers," she said, looking at me directly. "Walk me through when you first noticed the symptoms." I started to answer, but Caspian was already talking. "Doctor, I've documented everything here." He placed a printed spreadsheet on her desk, perfectly formatted, color-coded. "The tremors began approximately 3 months after our son Axel was born. Then came the confusion, the violent episodes, the progressive cognitive decline. Her previous physicians diagnosed severe postpartum depression with psychotic features. The old Briar would never let anyone speak for her. The old Briar would have rolled her eyes at a color-coded spreadsheet about her own body. But my daughter sat there empty, as if she couldn't hear her husband describing her like a case study. Dr. Gomez's eyes flickered between Briar and Caspian. Something tightened in her jaw. Mrs. Bell," she said gently, leaning forward. "Can you tell me how you're feeling today?" Briar's lips parted. For a moment I thought she might speak. "She has trouble articulating, Doctor." Caspian interrupted, his voice full of patient sorrow. "That's why I prepared this documentation. I want to make sure you have the complete picture." "I see," Dr. Gomez said quietly. But I could see she didn't just see. She was watching. The way a scientist watches an experiment that's producing unexpected results. She examined Briar's reflexes, her pupil response, the texture of her skin. Every question she asked, Briar Caspian answered. Every time she tried to make eye contact with my daughter, Caspian was already explaining, narrating, controlling. And Briar showed nothing. Not agreement, not disagreement, not even recognition that her husband was describing 3 years of her life as a descent into madness. The evidence had been in front of me the entire time. I had simply refused to see it. Then Caspian's phone buzzed. "I apologize," he said, glancing at the screen. Chicago office. There's an issue with one of our suppliers. I'll just be a moment. He stepped into the hallway, and the door clicked shut behind him. The atmosphere shifted violently. Dr. Gomez stood crossed to the door and locked it. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home made my heart lurch. Mr. Myers, she whispered, moving with clinical precision. I need you to listen very carefully and not react. My hands were shaking. What was happening? She was already collecting samples. Skin swabs from Breyer's wrists where I could now see one small patch of healthy skin surrounded by redness and irritation. Hair samples from the nape of her neck. Blood spots on small cards. Residual cream from beneath Breyer's fingernails sealed into evidence bags. 90 seconds of controlled urgency while my daughter sat there unmoving as if she didn't notice or didn't care or couldn't process what was happening. Your daughter isn't suffering from postpartum depression, Dr. Gomez said, her voice barely audible. The room tilted. What I managed. She sealed the last sample bag, tucked them all into her lab coat pocket, and sat down close to me. Too close. Her eyes darted to the locked door. Someone, she whispered, is deliberately making your daughter look like a psychiatric patient. 3 years of gratitude toward Caspian crumbled in an instant. 3 years of watching him tend to Breyer with such devotion, such patience, such perfect care. 3 years of believing I was watching true love endure impossible strain. I started. Get her away from her husband. Dr. Gomez said, her words coming fast and low. Today. Right now. Don't tell him where you're taking her. I'm sending these samples to a private lab I trust. If what I suspect is true, footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate, approaching. Dr. Gomez was back at her desk in seconds, composing her face into professional neutrality. I sat frozen, my mind screaming, my body locked in place. 3 years. I trusted him for 3 years. The brass door handle began to turn. I hadn't managed to say a single word. Caspian walked back into the room, carrying 2 objects that would haunt my nightmares for weeks, a thermal water bottle and an unlabeled white cream jar. Sorry about that, doctor, he said, smiling that patient smile. Chicago office drama. You know how it is. He set the items on the counter beside Breyer's wheelchair. Time for her medication, custom-imported organic blend for the tremors. I had watched this exact routine 100 times. Every morning, every evening, the same careful ritual. The herbal supplement in the water bottle. The skin treatment applied to her wrists, her temples, the base of her neck. I'd been grateful for Caspian's devotion, his consistency, his refusal to let Breyer miss even one application. Now every gesture looked sinister. Dr. Gomez's warning echoed in my skull. Someone is deliberately making your daughter look like a psychiatric patient. I watched Caspian uncap the water bottle, and my hands clenched into fists beneath the armrests of my chair. Actually, Mr. Bell, Dr. Gomez said, her voice professionally pleasant. I'd like to observe the skin's natural baseline reaction before any topical application, for my records. Caspian's hand froze on the cream jar lid. For half a second, maybe less, something flickered across his face. Irritation. Anger. The mask slipping. Then the patient's smile returned, smooth as oil. You know, doctor, she's extremely sensitive, he said, and now I could hear the edge buried beneath the pleasant tone. How had I never heard it before? Missing even one application triggers severe anxiety episodes. I'd hate to see her distressed. But I understand, Dr. Gomez said, not moving, not backing down. 5 minutes won't hurt. I need to document the pre-treatment condition. The silence stretched. Caspian stood there, cream jar in hand, looking at the doctor with that fixed smile. The air felt charged, dangerous, like the moment before lightning strikes. Of course, he said, finally setting the jar down with careful precision. Whatever you need, doctor. I want Breyer to get the best care possible, but his jaw was tight. His fingers drummed once against his thigh before he caught himself and stopped. Dr. Gomez moved to Breyer's wheelchair, gently taking my daughter's hands. She examined the skin, the redness, the chronic inflammation, the places where the flesh looked raw and damaged. I'd thought it was part of her illness. Nerve damage, circulation problems, something neurological. Then the doctor lifted Briar's left wrist and I saw it. My late wife's silver bracelet. Edna had given it to Briar on her 30th birthday 5 years ago. A delicate chain with a small clasp, worn constantly. I'd forgotten it was there. It had become part of Briar invisible through familiarity. Beneath the bracelet, a small patch of skin was perfectly normal. No redness, no inflammation, no tremor-induced bruising. Just healthy, normal skin exactly the way it should look. The surrounding areas where cream was applied daily showed chronic dermatitis. My chemical engineering mind, dormant for 3 years of grief and helplessness, suddenly roared back to life. Localized dermatitis, concentrated at application zones, none beneath the barrier. How interesting, Dr. Gomez said quietly, her eyes meeting mine for the briefest moment. This protected patch shows no inflammation whatsoever. That's not a disease pattern. That's a contact exposure pattern. The silver bracelet, my wife's last gift to our daughter, had been protecting one small patch of skin all along. Chukinye, the cream is hypoallergenic, Caspian said quickly. Completely organic. I had it specially formulated in Geneva. Sometimes the inflammation comes from the underlying condition, not the treatment. He was explaining, justifying, defending. Dr. Gomez made notes in her chart, her expression professionally neutral. The appointment concluded with prescriptions I knew Caspian would never fill, follow-up instructions he would politely ignore, and a reminder to call if symptoms worsened. In the hallway, Dr. Gomez shook my hand. Her grip was firm, urgent. "I'll call you," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "Soon." Then we were in the car. Caspian drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently on Briar's shoulder. I sat in the back seat, staring at the rain streaking down the windows, my mind racing through chemical interactions and delivery mechanisms I hadn't thought about in years. "Dad, are you all right back there?" Caspian asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Oh, fine," I managed. "Just tired." "Mio, that doctor seemed thorough," he said. "Maybe a little too cautious asking all those questions, but I suppose it's good to be careful." We stopped at a red light. Caspian reached for the cream jar in the console between the front seats. "See, Dad." He opened it, holding it up so I could see the pale, smooth consistency. Completely natural. The herbalist in Geneva sources everything organic. Wild harvested botanicals, no synthetic compounds. It's the only thing that helps her tremors. A faint chemical odor drifted back to where I sat. My entire body went cold. Dimethyl sulfoxide, DMSO. I'd worked with it for 15 years in pharmaceutical development. An industrial transdermal carrier. A solvent so effective at penetrating skin that we had to handle it with extreme caution in the lab. It could carry almost any compound through the skin barrier, as if the barrier didn't exist. It had a distinctive smell. Slightly sweet, slightly sulfurous, unmistakable if you knew what you were smelling. It was not found in any natural cosmetic product on Earth. It's very impressive, Caspian. I heard myself say, my voice steady despite the ice flooding my veins. You take such good care of her. She's my wife, he said simply, closing the jar, his hand returning to her shoulder. I'd do anything for her. The light turned green. We drove through the rain toward Briar's house, where Caspian would help her inside, settle her in her chair, apply the cream to her wrists and temples and neck, and make her a cup of tea from his special imported blend. I looked into the rearview mirror. My son-in-law's eyes met mine for a fraction of a second before returning to the road. I know that solvent, and I know it doesn't belong in any natural product on Earth. Sitting alone in my quiet house that evening, I opened my laptop and did what I should have done 3 years ago. I treated my daughter like a chemical engineering problem. The framed photograph of my late wife Edna watched from the corner of my desk, her smile frozen in a moment 20 years past. I thought about what she would say, If she could see me now, finally using the analytical mind she'd always admired 3 years too late. I pulled up a blank spreadsheet and began listing every symptom I'd observed in Briar since Axel's birth. Hand tremors, delayed pupillary reflexes, localized dermatitis concentrated at the wrists, temples, and neck exactly where the cream was applied, patchy hair loss, those strange white lines across her fingernails that the previous doctor had dismissed as calcium deficiency, Maze's lines. I'd seen them in textbooks during my pharmaceutical chemistry days. Classic indicator of chronic heavy metal exposure. Arsenic, thallium, lead compounds. My hands started shaking as I cross-referenced the symptoms against 35 years of lab experience. Tremors consistent with neurological interference. The dermatitis pattern matching contact exposure to a carrier agent. The sedation, the confusion, the complete personality erasure low-dose benzodiazepines could do that administered consistently over months. Combined with the DMSO carrier I'd smelled in the car, this wasn't postpartum depression. This was deliberate, methodical poisoning. Chika, you always said I saw structures in everything, I whispered to Edna's photograph. Even in people. Tonight I see the structure of a crime. I worked for 2 hours building the case like I used to build pharmaceutical trials. Hypothesis, data points, analysis, conclusion. By 10 o'clock, my desk was covered in printouts of medical journals, toxicology reports, chemical interaction charts. The grief that had paralyzed me for 3 years transformed into something colder, clearer. Then I did something that nearly broke me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through 3 years of photographs. Birthday parties, Thanksgiving dinners, random visits. I'd been documenting my daughter's decline without realizing it, capturing evidence in pixels and dates. I opened my personal calendar, the one where I noted every visit, every phone call, every time I saw Briar. Thanksgiving 2023. Briar had stayed at my house for 4 days, while Caspian visited his family in Chicago. In the photos from that weekend, her skin looked almost normal. Her eyes had a spark I hadn't seen in months. The tremors had subsided. I checked my notes from the Tuesday after she went home. Called to check on Briar. Caspian says she had a bad night, symptoms worse than ever. My birthday last March. Briar had spent 3 days here. Same pattern. Clear skin, brighter eyes, fewer tremors. 2 days after returning home, Caspian called to tell me she'd had a violent episode and needed increased medication. How many warning signs had I missed? While I sat in this quiet house, grateful my son-in-law was taking such good care of my daughter. Every time she was away from him, she improved. Every time she returned, she relapsed within 48 hours. The data had always been there. I'd been too grief-stricken, too lonely, too grateful for Caspian's devotion to see it. I closed my laptop at 11:30 and sat in the dark, feeling my age in every joint, every breath. 68 years old, and I'd let a monster poison my daughter for 3 years because I was too broken by my wife's death to think clearly. But I was thinking clearly now. The next morning, December 21st, I drove to Briar's house carrying 2 empty glass vials in my jacket pocket. The kind I used to use in the lab, carefully cleaned, sealed with rubber stoppers. Caspian opened the door, phone pressed to his ear, gestured me inside with a welcoming smile. "Dad's here," he called toward the living room. "Tell him I'll be out in 5 minutes, conference call from New York." He disappeared into his study, his voice dropping to business tones. My heart hammered as I walked into the kitchen. Briar sat in her wheelchair by the window, staring at the rain. The thermal water bottle stood on the counter beside the unlabeled cream jar, exactly where Caspian always kept them. 30 seconds. That's all I had. I pulled out the vials with shaking hands. Unscrewed the water bottle, poured liquid into the first vial until it was 3/4 full, sealed it. Opened the cream jar, used a clean wooden coffee stirrer to scoop a sample into the second vial, sealed it. Refilled the water bottle from the filtered water pitcher. Don't shake. Don't contaminate. Don't leave evidence. The vials went into my jacket pocket just as I heard Caspian's footsteps in the hallway. "Who just came to check on my girl, Caspian?" I called out, my voice steady despite the terror coursing through me. Take your time. I turned toward Briar, trying to slow my breathing when small arms wrapped around my leg. Grandpa, little Axel. My 4-year-old grandson came running into the kitchen with his arms outstretched, his bright eyes and innocent smile completely unaware of the dark truth unfolding around him. I lifted him, feeling the glass vials press against my ribs. "Hi there, buddy," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "How's my favorite grandson?" "Good." He hugged my neck, then pulled back to look at me with those clear, trusting eyes. "Grandpa, Daddy said Mommy has to put on her cream to be a good girl." The words hit me like a fist to the chest. I held my grandson close, feeling the weight of the evidence in my pocket, my mind reeling. Conditioning. Psychological manipulation wrapped in the language of love and obedience, making the poison a measure of moral worth. "Did he now?" I managed, keeping my voice light. "So, Daddy says good girls take their medicine and don't ask questions." 4 years old. Did my son say things like that at 4? I couldn't remember. But I remembered clearly that no normal parent conditions a child to believe medication equals moral worth. I held my grandson close, feeling the glass vials heavy in my pocket, and wondered what else Caspian had been teaching this boy. I left Briar's house with Axel's words echoing in my mind and 2 glass vials heavy in my pocket. Good girls take their medicine and don't ask questions. 4 years old and already learning that compliance equals love. The private testing lab promised same-day results for the water bottle. I dropped off the sample at noon and spent the afternoon driving aimlessly through Portland's December rain, waiting for my phone to ring. It rang at 3 o'clock. I pulled into the lab parking lot and walked inside with my heart hammering. The technician handed me a sealed envelope. I sat in my car and tore it open. The lab results came back negative, and for one terrible moment, I wondered if I had lost my mind along with my wife 2 years ago. Completely negative. No sedatives, no heavy metals, no toxic compounds of any kind. The water Caspian had been giving Briar for 3 years was nothing but filtered water with trace minerals, exactly what he'd always claimed. I stared at the printed analysis until the numbers blurred. Was Dr. Gomez wrong? Was I seeing patterns in random noise, conspiracy, and coincidence? Grief did strange things to the mind. I knew that. I'd watched colleagues lose themselves in irrational thinking after personal tragedies. 3 years of watching Caspian carefully measure out that water morning and evening, the ritual never varying. I tested it. It was clean. My hypothesis crumbled. I sat in that parking lot for 15 minutes, holding the negative results, feeling 68 years of age settle into my bones like concrete. A lonely widower who'd accused his devoted son-in-law of systematic poisoning based on a chemical engineer's paranoid delusions. I pulled out my phone, found Caspian's contact. My finger hovered over the call button. The apology formed in my mind. "I'm sorry. I've been paranoid since Edna died. You've been nothing but kind to Briar, and I repaid you with suspicion. Thank you for taking care of my girl when I couldn't." But before I pressed the button, I remembered the silver bracelet, the small patch of perfectly normal skin beneath it, surrounded by chronic dermatitis everywhere else. The inflammation stopped exactly at the barrier, as precise as a laboratory boundary line. I remembered the DMSO scent from the car yesterday, the chemical odor that didn't belong in any natural product. The water was clean, but I'd tested the wrong delivery vehicle. If the water was clean, where was the weapon? I drove home through rush-hour traffic, my mind circling the problem like a moth around flame. The cream vial sat in my refrigerator waiting for the full toxicology panel I'd ordered. Results in 3 to 5 business days, they'd said. But the skin samples Dr. Gomez collected would come back faster. I parked in my driveway as winter darkness settled over Beaverton. Inside, I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey I didn't drink and sat in the living room watching the clock. At 7 o'clock, my phone rang. Dr. Gomez. Her voice was tight, professional, but I heard the urgency beneath it. "Mr. Myers," she said. "The results from the skin samples came back. You need to sit down." I was already sitting. My hand tightened on the phone. "What did you find, Doctor?" Haloperidol, she said. First-generation antipsychotic, combined with neuroirritant metallic compounds derivatives designed to cause neurological symptoms that mimic psychiatric conditions. All concentrated where the cream is applied, virtually absent beneath the bracelet. The room tilted. The water bottle was a decoy, Dr. Gomez continued. He shifted entirely to transdermal delivery. The delivery method is sophisticated DMSO carrier solution that makes skin permeable, allowing the compounds to absorb directly into tissue and bloodstream. It's elegant in a horrifying way. No ingestion required, no risk of vomiting or refusal. Just daily application of what appears to be innocent cosmetic cream. My mind flooded with memories. 3 years of watching Caspian apply that cream. Every morning, 8 o'clock. Every evening, 9 o'clock. The ritual never varied. Never permitted nurses to help. Never allowed the occasional nanny to assist. Never let me apply it during my visits. Sir Briar only feels comfortable when I do it, he'd say with that patient smile. She gets anxious if anyone else touches her. I know it's a lot of work, but it's the one thing that seems to help her tremors. Every gentle touch was administering poison. Mr. Myers, Dr. Gomez's voice pulled me back. Are you there? I'm here. The concentrations are consistent with chronic long-term exposure. At least 2 years, possibly 3. This isn't accidental contamination or a manufacturing error. Someone formulated this deliberately. He never let anyone else apply it, I said, my voice breaking. Never. He said she only trusted him. I'm filing a formal report with Adult Protective Services tonight, Dr. Gomez said. The evidence is clear. But Mr. Myers, I need you to understand removing her from his care immediately could be dangerous. If he's been dosing her consistently for years, sudden cessation could trigger severe withdrawal symptoms. So what do? I asked. Watch him keep poisoning her. No. But we need to be strategic. I'm consulting with a toxicologist and a psychiatrist who specializes in medication-induced psychosis. We need a safe detox protocol and legal protection in place before we act. Can you maintain normalcy for a few more days? Not tip him off that we know. 3 years. Every morning and every night. Rubbing poison into my daughter's skin with his own hands and smiling at me. I can do that, I said. After she hung up, I sat in the dark living room, phone still pressed to my ear. 3 years of daily poisoning. 3 years of Caspian's gentle hands applying cream to my daughter's wrists. Her neck, her temples, every touch a calculated dose. The water bottle was theater. The cream was the crime. At midnight, I spread 3 years of family photographs across my desk and began searching for the moment my daughter's life was stolen. Dr. Gomez had confirmed the poison. The cream was the weapon. But I needed to know when it started, how long she'd been suffering, while I sat in my quiet house grateful that someone was taking care of her. I pulled out every photo album, every envelope of printed pictures from birthdays and holidays and random Sunday visits. Edna's framed portrait watched from the corner of my desk, my wife of 40 years, gone 2 years now. Her steady gaze a reminder that she'd always said I saw structures in everything. Help me see this one, I whispered to her photograph. I arranged the photos chronologically. Briar's wedding to Caspian, June 2019. My daughter glowing in white lace, Caspian's hand at the small of her back, both of them radiant. I'd been so happy she'd found someone after her mother's diagnosis. Someone to lean on when the cancer inevitably won. Axel's birth, January 2022. Briar exhausted but beautiful, holding her newborn son Caspian beside her, looking every bit the proud father, still vibrant, still herself. Then something changed. March 2022. 2 months after Axel's birth. A photo from Mother's Day brunch at Briar's house. I stared at it under the desk lamp. My daughter's smile didn't reach her eyes. Her skin looked inflamed around the temples. The tremor in her left hand blurred the edge of the image. I created 2 columns on the desk. Photos taken at my house during Briar's visits. Photos taken at her home with Caspian. The pattern emerged like a chemical formula writing itself. Thanksgiving 2023. Breyer had stayed at my house for 4 days while Caspian visited family in Chicago. I found the photos from that weekend. Her skin nearly clear, eyes focused and bright, the tremors minimal. We'd baked Edna's pumpkin pie recipe together, and Breyer had measured the ingredients herself without spilling anything. I pulled out my calendar from 2023, the one where I noted every phone call, every visit. Tuesday, November 28th. 3 days after she returned home, Caspian called to tell me Breyer had suffered a severe relapse, broke a glass during a violent episode, spent the night sedated. My birthday, March 2024. Breyer visited for 3 days. The photos showed the same improvement. Clearer skin, brighter eyes. We'd walked through the neighborhood together and she'd talked about expanding the cosmetics line into natural skincare, real conversation, real plans, real Breyer emerging after months of fog. 2 days after she went home, my calendar note read, Caspian reports. Breyer experiencing increased confusion and aggression. Adjusting her medication dosage. Christmas 2023. She'd stayed 5 days. The photos from that visit were the best I'd seen in 2 years. Breyer playing with Axel on my living room floor, building blocks together, laughing at his toddler pronunciation of grandpa. Her hands steady, her smile genuine. 3 years of evidence, sitting in photo albums and calendar notes. I had been too grief-stricken over losing Edna to see what was happening to Breyer. Every extended visit showed visible recovery. Every return home triggered rapid deterioration. The data had been screaming at me. I just didn't know how to listen. I pulled out my calendar and began reviewing the notes more carefully. Not just the visits, but Caspian's behavior around them. Christmas 2023, Day 5. The day Breyer looked most like herself. I'd noted 2 phone calls from Caspian that day. First at noon, checking on her, saying he missed her. Second at 4 o'clock, plumbing emergency at the house, water everywhere, he needed to come pick her up right away. She'd left that evening. By the next weekend, the photos from their house showed her back in the wheelchair, eyes vacant, tremors returned. Easter 2024. Breyer stayed 3 days. Day 3, she'd helped me plant tomatoes in the garden, her idea, her energy, her hands in the soil without gloves. I remembered being amazed at how much better she seemed. That afternoon, Caspian called. Axel had a fever, needed his mother. Could I bring her home early? I checked Axel's daycare photos from that week, posted on their parent portal. The boy looked perfectly healthy in every picture. The longer Breyer stayed symptom-free, the more anxious Caspian became. Not because he missed his wife, because her recovery threatened his control. He wasn't missing her. He was terrified she was recovering. If you've ever missed a warning sign because you were too busy trusting someone, you understand what I felt in that moment. The shame, the fury, the sick certainty that I'd been an accomplice to my daughter's torture simply by being blind. I closed the last album at 2 o'clock in the morning. 3 years of data proved systematic poisoning. Dr. Gomez had preliminary toxicology showing the compounds in Breyer's skin samples. The photos documented the pattern. The calendar notes revealed Caspian's manipulation. But proving it and stopping it were different problems. I thought about Desmond Stewart, the retired police detective turned private investigator who'd helped me with background checks during construction projects. Smart, thorough, someone who understood how to build cases that would hold up under scrutiny. We'd worked together in 2015 when I suspected a subcontractor of fraud. Desmond had found the paper trail that saved my company $250,000. He had federal credentials, experience with complex investigations, the kind of methodical mind that could help me turn suspicion into proof into action. Remember Desmond, I said to Edna's photograph. Helped us with that corrupt subcontractor. He's a private investigator now. I needed someone who could dig into Caspian's background, find the financial motive I knew had to be there, build a case that would hold up in court. Someone who understood that I wasn't asking for advice, I was asking for help planning what came next. Because Dr. Gomez had been clear, removing Breyer from Caspian's care immediately could trigger dangerous withdrawal. We needed a strategy, a safe detox protocol, legal protection, and I needed to know everything about the man who'd been poisoning my daughter for 3 years. Tomorrow, I would call Desmond. Not to ask if I was right, the photos proved I was right, but to figure out what to do next. Because proving your son-in-law is poisoning your daughter is one thing. Stopping him without getting her killed is another. Desmond Stewart's office smelled like old coffee and case files, and the moment I walked through the door carrying 3 years of evidence, I knew I'd found the right man to help me destroy my son-in-law. I'd called him at 7 that morning. December 22nd. Told him I needed help with a criminal investigation. Desmond hadn't asked questions over the phone, just gave me an address downtown and a time. Now he sat across from me at a desk cluttered with folders and certifications, a former police officer turned licensed private investigator with federal credentials. 55 years old, gray at the temples, the kind of steady competence that came from decades of building cases that held up in court. Walk me through everything from the beginning, he said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. Don't leave anything out, even if it seems small. I spread the evidence across his desk. Photo albums showing the improvement relapse pattern. Dr. Gomez's preliminary toxicology results. The symptom timeline I'd constructed. My calendar notes documenting Caspian's manufactured emergencies. 3 years, I said. Haloperidol in the cream, heavy metals, transdermal delivery via DMSO carrier. The water bottle tested clean, that was theater. The weapon is the cream he applies to her skin twice daily. Desmond wrote steadily, his pen moving across the legal pad in precise lines. And the water bottle tested clean, he said, not looking up. Smart, classic misdirection. Make the obvious vehicle clean so if anyone gets suspicious, they test the wrong thing. He asked about the silver bracelet that protected skin beneath it. About the photos showing Briar's recovery during visits to my house. About Axel's conditioning good girls take their medicine. I told him everything. The doctors whispered warning in the examination room. The scent of industrial solvent in the car. The pattern I'd been too grief-stricken and grateful to see. Desmond listened without interrupting, taking meticulous notes, his expression never changing. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me directly. A simple question, Howard. Was Caspian married before your daughter? I froze. In 3 years of watching Caspian care for Briar with what I'd thought was devotion, I'd never asked about his past. Never wondered about previous relationships, previous marriages, the life he'd lived before he walked my daughter down the aisle. I don't know, I said, shame flooding through me. I never asked. He seemed so devoted to Briar. After Edna died, I was just grateful someone was taking care of my girl. Desmond nodded slowly, writing something on his pad. That's the first thing I'll check, he said. Marriage records, divorce filings, death certificates. If he's done this before, there'll be a pattern. Men who poison their wives don't usually start with perfection, they practice. How well did I actually know this man who married my daughter? What else had I failed to ask? I need surveillance, Desmond said. Eyes on his daily routine, documentation of the medication ritual, video evidence of him applying the cream. Can you get access to the house when he's not there? Shakito, he has a business meeting downtown this afternoon, I said. 2 to 4 o'clock. I can be in and out in 20 minutes. Desmond opened a drawer and pulled out 3 small devices that looked like ordinary power outlet splitters. My micro cameras, he explained. Commercially available, legal with the homeowner's consent. Your daughter owns the house, correct? Her mother left it to her. And then you have implied consent as her father during a welfare check. Kitchen, living room, anywhere he administers medication. They'll stream encrypted feeds to this tablet. He handed me a small device. Password is on the back. Don't write it down. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I let myself into Briar's house with the spare key she'd given me years ago. Caspian's car was gone, the business meeting downtown, just like he'd mentioned on the phone that morning when I'd called to check on Briar. My daughter sat in her wheelchair by the living room window, staring at nothing. I kissed the top of her head, Told her I was just checking on the plumbing and got to work. Kitchen first. The outlet splitter went in beside the coffee maker, giving a clear view of the counter where Caspian prepared the medication. Living room next, positioned to capture the area where he applied the cream each evening. Hallway camera covering the route to Briar's bedroom. My hands shook as I worked, but the installations were simple. Plug-in, test the connection on the tablet, move to the next location. "Hey, Grandpa, what are you doing?" I turned to find Axel standing in the kitchen doorway clutching a stuffed dinosaur, his bright eyes full of innocent curiosity. "Just fixing some wiring, buddy," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Old houses need maintenance." He followed me to the living room, watched me install the second camera, asked questions about electricity and wires that I answered with half my attention, while the other half calculated angles and sightlines. I was finishing the hallway installation when Axel tugged on my sleeve. "Grandpa, can I tell you a secret?" I knelt down to his level. "Of course, buddy. You can tell Grandpa anything." He leaned close, his small voice dropping to a whisper. "Yesterday I took Mommy's cream tube by mistake from the bathroom and Daddy got really mad. He said I should never ever touch it. He looked scary." The outlet splitter nearly slipped from my hands. "I'm really mad?" I asked carefully. "What did he do?" he yelled. Then he took the cream tube and put it somewhere high where I can't reach. He said touching Mommy's medicine is very, very bad. A 4-year-old child whispering a secret about making his father angry. In a normal family, that would mean spilled juice or a broken toy. In this house, it meant touching poison. "Did he hurt you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "No. But he looked really mad, Grandpa. I was scared." I pulled my grandson into a hug, feeling his small body against mine, wondering what else this child had seen that he was too young to understand. Not upset, not concerned, really mad. I didn't understand why that made me so uneasy. But I knew I needed to find out exactly what happened when Caspian got really mad at a child who couldn't possibly know what he was touching. I left Briar's house with Axel's whispered confession echoing in my mind and surveillance cameras streaming encrypted feeds to my tablet. That evening, while Caspian was at a business dinner downtown, I returned with a chemistry toolkit and 24 glass vials. I stood in my daughter's bathroom, preparing to do what I'd spent 35 years perfecting in pharmaceutical labs, replace one compound with another without leaving a trace. Caspian wouldn't return until 10 o'clock. I had 3 hours. I worked with surgical precision, the way I used to work in sterile lab environments at the pharmaceutical company. Every product he could have contaminated needed to be replaced with something neutral, hypoallergenic, harmless. The cream jar first. The unlabeled white jar that sat on the bathroom counter, applied to Briar's wrists and temples, twice daily for 3 years. I opened a fresh container of drugstore moisturizer I'd chosen specifically for its identical color and texture. Using a small spatula, I transferred the toxic cream into a labeled glass vial, sealed it with evidence tape, dated it. Then I filled the original jar with the harmless replacement matching the fill level exactly. Smoothed the surface to match the texture Caspian would expect. Wiped the rim clean. Shampoo next. Her bottle of organic shampoo, I'd checked the ingredients list against known DMSO carriers. Possible contamination vector. I replaced it with sulfate-free organic shampoo, identical packaging, similar scent profile. Body lotion, soap, hand cream. Every product in her bathroom that touched her skin went into evidence vials replaced with neutral alternatives. Match the color. Match the viscosity. Keep the containers identical. This is what I'd done for decades in controlled environments. Pharmaceutical compound substitution, maintaining strict protocols, ensuring perfect replication. Never thought I'd use that expertise like this. 35 years working with pharmaceutical compounds, building medications to heal people. I never imagined I'd use that expertise to save my daughter from her own husband. By 8:30, every toxic original sat preserved in labeled vials in my locked evidence case. I moved through the bedroom, checking for additional contamination vectors. Found another cream tube in her nightstand drawer. Another in the master bathroom. Both went into vials. Chain of custody had to be perfect for court. Each vial labeled with location, date, time, my initials. I photographed every step with my phone, documenting the collection process. Then I wiped down every surface with alcohol swabs. No residue, no contamination, no sign I'd been there. The bathroom looked identical to when I'd entered, but every poison had been neutralized. I stood in the doorway, looking at the innocent-seeming bottles and jars, wondering how long it would take for Breyer's symptoms to improve once the daily dosing stopped. Days, weeks. And what would Caspian do when he noticed? I was home by 9:30, evidence case locked in my basement safe when my phone rang. "Desmond, I found the first doctor," he said without preamble. "Guy's name is Marcus Halloway, neurologist. He was Breyer's attending physician 3 years ago at Providence Medical Center." I pulled out my calendar, checking dates. December 2022, right after Breyer's symptoms first appeared. "Caspian told me that doctor was incompetent," I said. "Said he dismissed Breyer's concerns, wasn't thorough enough. That's why we transferred to Swedish Medical Center." "Yeah, well, Dr. Halloway tells a different story," Desmond said. "I interviewed him yesterday. He remembers your daughter clearly. Said he suspected foul play from the beginning. The symptom presentation was atypical neurological decline without clear organic cause. He requested comprehensive blood toxicology screens, full heavy metal panel, and 3 days later, Caspian transferred Breyer to Swedish Medical Center. Medical records were never forwarded despite multiple requests. Dr. Halloway tried to follow up, got stonewalled by administrative delays and insurance red tape. Eventually gave up. I sat down heavily in my desk chair. "He was getting close to the truth," I said. "Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. I pulled Breyer's hospital records, took some doing, but I got them. Providence Medical Center 2022. Swedish Medical Center 2023. Now Legacy Health with Dr. Gomez 2025. 3 hospitals in 3 years. 3 hospitals," I repeated slowly. I contacted Dr. Patricia Vance at Swedish. She was Breyer's neurologist for about 8 months in 2023. Same story, she flagged neurological inconsistencies, wanted to rule out environmental toxins, requested advanced testing. 2 weeks later, Caspian transferred Breyer to Legacy Health, citing need for more specialized care. 3 hospitals in 3 years. Not because the doctors were incompetent, but because any doctor who started asking the right questions was removed before they could find the answers. "It's a pattern," Howard Desmond said. "Systematic doctor shopping to avoid detection. Every time a physician got suspicious, Caspian moved her. Not to get better care, to stay ahead of anyone who might figure out what he was doing." I thought about Dr. Gomez in that examination room, locking the door the moment Caspian stepped into the hallway. Collecting samples with clinical urgency. She'd known immediately. And she'd been the first one Caspian couldn't transfer away from before the truth emerged. "Dr. Halloway will testify?" I asked. "Already got his statement." "Dr. Vance too. Both remember the cases clearly, both documented their suspicions in their private notes. Neither could prove anything at the time, but now with Dr. Gomez's toxicology results, their early suspicions become part of a pattern. How long before we have enough for charges?" "Shocked to say, we're building it," Desmond said. "But Howard, you need to understand, men who plan this methodically don't just stop when caught. They escalate. If Caspian realizes you're investigating, or worse, if he notices Breyer's symptoms improving—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I sat holding the phone after we hung up, thinking about 3 hospitals in 3 years. 3 doctors who saw something wrong. Every time a physician got close to the truth, Caspian moved her. Not to get better care, to stay ahead of detection. And I wondered what kind of man plans that methodically. What he'd do when he realized the chemicals had stopped working. I didn't have to wonder long what Caspian would do when he realized the truth. That afternoon, Desmond and I drove to meet the witness who could prove exactly how far he'd already gone to silence anyone who got too close. Priscilla Simmons opened her apartment door 3 inches, chain lock still fastened, and I saw in her eyes the same fear I'd been carrying for days, the terror of knowing the truth and being powerless to speak it. "I'm Ms. Simmons." Desmond showed his credentials. "I'm Desmond Stewart, private investigator. This is Howard Myers, Briarbell's father." We spoke on the phone. She looked at me for a long moment before sliding the chain free. Priscilla was 42 years old, a former private nurse who stood in her cramped apartment, looking smaller and more frightened than someone who'd simply changed jobs. She looked like someone who'd been running from a threat for 2 years. "I shouldn't have agreed to this," she said, gesturing us to a worn sofa. "But when you said Dr. Gomez found something, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." We sat. Priscilla remained standing, arms wrapped around herself. "I was Briar's private nurse for 6 months in 2023, she began. "Mr. Bell Caspian hired me through a medical staffing agency. The job was straightforward at first. Help with daily care, monitor symptoms, keep records." "What changed?" Desmond asked. Priscilla's hands tightened on her arms. 3 months in, he approached me with a typed affidavit. Very official-looking legal language. It claimed Briar had engaged in self-harm during violent psychotic episodes, scratched her arms, pulled her hair, banged her head against walls. He wanted me to sign it as a medical witness. My stomach turned cold. "But she never did those things?" I asked. "Never. Not once in 6 months. I documented every shift, every interaction. There was never any violence, no self-harm, nothing like what that affidavit described." Priscilla's voice shook. "That's why I refused to sign it. I told him I couldn't attest to something I'd never witnessed." "What did he do?" Desmond was taking notes. 2 days later, I received a letter from his attorney, threatening me with defamation lawsuits and breach of confidentiality, claiming I'd made false accusations against him, that I'd violated patient privacy by discussing the case with unauthorized parties, which I hadn't. The letter said if I continued working for the family or discussed anything I'd observed, they'd pursue legal action that would cost me my nursing license. She walked to a filing cabinet, pulled out a folder, handed it to Desmond. The letter was their official letterhead, threatening legal language designed to terrify. "I resigned the next day," Priscilla said quietly. "Sent my notice to the staffing agency, never went back to the house." Desmond photographed every page. "Ms. Simmons," I said carefully, "why didn't you report this to authorities, file a complaint with the medical board?" She looked at me then, and I saw something in her expression that made me flinch. Guilt and accusation. I should have," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I should have called someone, but I was scared. The lawyer's letter was very specific about what would happen if I spoke to anyone. And honestly," she looked directly at me, "I thought you knew, that your family just accepted it, because of his money, his position. I thought you all knew and chose not to see it, because it was easier that way." The words hit like a physical blow. "We didn't know," I said quietly. "I didn't know, but I should have." She said I knew and chose not to see it. I sat in my car for an hour afterward. She was right. Desmond got Priscilla's full statement signed and notarized. Another piece of evidence for the case we were building. Another witness to Caspian's systematic intimidation. But I couldn't stop thinking about her words as I drove back to Briar's house that evening. It was 36 hours since I'd replaced the toxic compounds with harmless substitutes. 36 hours since the daily poisoning stopped. I'd told Caspian I wanted to stay overnight, help with Briar's care, give him a break. He'd accepted gratefully, saying he had early meetings. I sat in Briar's bedroom as she slept, watching her chest rise and fall, searching for any sign of improvement. At midnight, she suddenly sat bolt upright. Her eyes were wide but unfocused, staring at something I couldn't see. Then she screamed, "So don't put it on me anymore." I moved to her side immediately, placing gentle hands on her shoulders. Briar, sweetheart. You're safe. I'm here." But she wasn't seeing me. She was somewhere else, trapped in a memory or nightmare. her hands clawed at empty air, cowering from an invisible tormentor. "Please, I'll be good, I won't fight it. Just don't make me take it anymore, Briar," I said again, keeping my voice soft, steady. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you. I'm here." Her wild eyes suddenly focused. The fog cleared. For the first time in 3 years, my daughter truly saw me. Her breathing slowed. Her hand reached up weakly, trembling to touch my face, confirming I was real. "Dad." One word, whispered with perfect clarity. Recognition. Understanding. Briar was in there, fighting her way back through 3 years of chemical fog. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm right here." "Dad." She called me Dad, for the first time in 3 years. Her eyes searched mine for another moment, her hand still on my cheek. Then exhaustion pulled her back under. Her eyes rolled back and she slipped into deep sleep, the effort of breaking through too much for her poisoned system to sustain. I sat frozen beside her bed, tears streaming down my face. 5 seconds, maybe less. 5 seconds of clarity after 36 months of darkness. But those 5 seconds proved everything. The chemicals were leaving her system. Briar was still in there, fighting her way back to us. And I had maybe days, maybe hours before Caspian noticed his weapon had stopped working. I sat beside Briar's bed for the rest of that night, watching her sleep, hoping for another breakthrough. The moment she'd called me, Dad kept replaying in my mind, 5 seconds of clarity, proving she was still fighting to come back. At 3 in the morning, my daughter woke again, just long enough to whisper 5 words that would unlock the motive for everything. "He doesn't want me to remember the nursery." Her eyes were unfocused, struggling against exhaustion and whatever remained of the chemicals in her system. I leaned closer, my hand covering hers. "Remember what, sweetheart? What happened in the nursery? Caspian doesn't want me to remember." Her words came in broken fragments, each one requiring tremendous effort. "The nursery. What did you find there, Briar? What did you see?" But exhaustion pulled her back under before she could answer. Her breathing deepened, and she was asleep again. I sat frozen, processing what she'd said. 3 years ago, when the symptoms began, Briar spent her days in the nursery with newborn Axel. That's where she would have been when she discovered whatever triggered Caspian to start poisoning her. Something in that room. Something incriminating enough that he needed to erase her memory of it. Christmas Eve morning, I called Desmond from Briar's study. "The nursery," I said. "She mentioned something about the nursery. Can you walk me through recovering deleted files from her old laptop, the one she used when Axel was born?" "You're at the house now?" Desmond asked. "Joe Caspian's at a client meeting until noon. I have the laptop." Desmond guided me through the recovery process remotely. Deleted files folder, January 2022. And there it was. Draft email to their family attorney, dated January 15th, 2022. Subject line, urgent unauthorized transfers. Châtillon. Dear Attorney Frost. I read aloud to Desmond. "I've discovered approximately $2.3 million in unauthorized transfers from company accounts to an investment fund registered under my husband's name. The transfers occurred over the past 18 months without my knowledge or consent. I'm requesting an urgent meeting to discuss divorce proceedings and immediate modification of all trust documents to remove Caspian as beneficiary. This cannot wait." The email was never sent. I checked the metadata. January 15th, 2022. Saved as draft at 2:47 p.m. I pulled up my old calendar notes. January 18th, 2022. First notation about Briar's tremors and confusion. 3 days later. January 15th. January 18th. 3 days. That was all the time he needed to decide my daughter had to be silenced forever. "He found the draft," Desmond said quietly over the phone. "Probably monitored her email. Saw she was about to expose the embezzlement and file for divorce. So he started poisoning her before she could send it." "At the company," I said. "Her mother's company. Worth 8 to 10 million. If Breyer divorced him, he'd lose access to everything. But if she became mentally incompetent, he could petition for conservatorship, control the assets legally while she's institutionalized. That's what this has always been about, Howard. Not just silencing her taking everything. I saved the recovered email to 3 different drives, photographed the screen, sent copies to Desmond. That afternoon, Caspian arrived at the house carrying a thick binder, his expression one of solemn concern. He said, settling onto the sofa beside me. We need to talk about Breyer's care. I played my part. The grieving father worn down by 3 years of watching his daughter deteriorate. What is it? I asked, my voice tired. Her condition is deteriorating rapidly. The doctors at Legacy Health recommended transfer to a specialized long-term care facility. There's an excellent private institution that specializes in severe psychiatric cases. I've arranged admission for December 28th. He opened the binder, showed me glossy brochures of a facility that looked more like a prison than a hospital. I know this is hard, Caspian continued, his voice full of false sympathy. But we have to do what's best for her. These consent forms need your signature as next of kin. I read through the documents slowly. Standard medical consent on pages 1 through 3. Then page 4 buried in legal language a clause granting Caspian temporary financial power of attorney over all corporate assets during Breyer's institutionalization. What exactly does this clause mean? I asked, pointing. Full asset management. Just temporary, Caspian said smoothly. While she's receiving specialized care, someone needs to manage the company operations. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure for stealing $8 million. I looked at him. This man who'd poisoned my daughter for 3 years, isolated her from medical care, terrorized witnesses into silence, all to steal her inheritance. Oh, you'll take good care of her, won't you? I asked, my voice shaking with what he thought was grief, but was actually rage. Of course, Dad. You have my word. I took the pen with trembling hands, played the broken old man perfectly, and signed each page. Howard Myers, not Howard Eugene Myers. 17 years ago, when drafting our wills and estate documents, my wife Edna had insisted our attorney add a specific clause to her durable power of attorney. She'd looked at me across the lawyer's desk and said I needed to be protected from my own trusting nature. Any family power of attorney signed by me would be legally void unless it included my full legal name, Howard Eugene Myers. The clause had seemed paranoid at the time. Edna explaining that if I ever signed something under duress or manipulation, the missing middle name would invalidate it. A small protection against my tendency to trust too easily. My wife always said I needed to be protected from my own trusting nature. 17 years after she insisted on that clause, Edna was still protecting our family. Caspian watched me sign the last page, looked at the signature Howard Myers, and smiled with complete satisfaction. He had no idea the documents he was holding were completely worthless. After Caspian left with his worthless signed documents, I drove to a hotel near Breyer's house and waited for nightfall. The surveillance cameras I'd installed were streaming encrypted feeds to my tablet. I needed to see what happened when he thought no one was watching. The timestamp on the kitchen camera reads 1:30 a.m. December 25th, and I'm watching my son-in-law poison my daughter. The hotel room is dark, except for the blue glow of my laptop screen. I sit frozen watching infrared footage from Breyer's kitchen, rendered in ghostly green-white. Caspian moves through the frame with casual efficiency, believing himself alone and unobserved. He's wearing a dark t-shirt and sweatpants. No gloves, no protective equipment, just the comfortable clothes of a man moving through his own kitchen in the middle of the night. From a locked drawer beneath the sink, a drawer I didn't even know existed, he removes a small black case, opens it on the counter. Inside, rows of glass vials precisely labeled in his neat handwriting. A digital precision scale, the kind used in pharmaceutical compounding, and a small leather notebook. He opens the notebook, consults it like a recipe book, running his finger down a page of calculations. The notebook is filled with formulas, dosage calculations, dated entries, tracking concentrations and timing. This isn't improvisation. This is a refined, perfected process. He measures compounds on the scale with laboratory precision. Milligrams, not grams. Each measurement checked twice. Mixing ratios that suggest chemical engineering expertise, not amateur guesswork. The cream jar, the one I'd replaced with harmless moisturizer 2 days ago, sits on the counter. He opens it, expecting to see his toxic mixture. For a moment, I hold my breath. Will he notice the substitution? He leans in slightly, sniffs. The drugstore moisturizer I'd chosen had the same faint botanical scent, same pale color, same thick consistency. I'd spent 40 minutes in the pharmacy aisle making certain of it. He's already measured out today's dose into a clean mixing container, adds the compounds, stirs methodically, returns the mixture to the jar. He doesn't know he's mixing poison into drugstore moisturizer, creating a harmless paste that will do nothing to my daughter except allow her neurons to slowly recover. He rewinds the footage, watches it again and again. Each time the same meticulous precision, the same casual evil. The timestamp advances. 1:42 a.m. 12 minutes to prepare a dose that will keep Breyer sedated and confused for another 24 hours. 12 minutes he's performed this ritual, how many times? 700 nights more. He wipes down the scale, returns. Everything to the locked case, replaces it in the hidden drawer. Closes the cream jar and sets it back on the bathroom counter, where Breyer will find it in the morning. Where she's been trained to apply it faithfully, believing it helps her tremors. Then he walks out of frame and the kitchen is empty again. I sit in the dark hotel room, my hands shaking, watching the timestamp advance through the early morning hours. Saving the footage to 4 different drives, documenting every second. At 8 o'clock Christmas morning, I drive to Breyer's house carrying wrapped presents and a smile I don't feel. Caspian opens the door wearing a festive red sweater, the picture of holiday cheer. So, Dad, Merry Christmas, come in, come in. Breyer's in the living room with Axel. The house smells like cinnamon rolls. Christmas tree lights twinkle in the window. Bing Crosby plays softly from hidden speakers. Breyer sits in her wheelchair near the tree, her face pale in the multicolored glow. Her hands tremble in her lap. When she tries to lift her coffee cup, Caspian is there instantly, his hand steadying her grip with practiced tenderness. Easy, sweetheart, he murmurs. I've got you. I watch his hand on hers and think about those same hands measuring poison 6 hours ago. Axel runs to me, arms outstretched. I lift my grandson, hold him close, trying not to let him see the rage on my face. Grandpa, it's Christmas. Are those for me? Some of them, buddy. Where should we put them? We add my presents to the pile under the tree. Breyer watches with unfocused eyes, her expression distant. But then Caspian leaves the room to check on something in the kitchen, and she turns her head toward me. Her lips move. She's trying to say something. I move closer, kneeling beside her wheelchair. What is it, sweetheart? Her mouth forms words, but only slurred sounds emerge. The tremors intensify. She's fighting so hard to communicate, her whole body shaking with the effort. Dad, I'm listening, Breyer. Take your time. But footsteps sound in the hallway. Caspian returning. Breyer's eyes fill with frustration and something that looks like fear. Then the moment is gone, and her expression goes blank again. Everything okay? Caspian asks, his smile warm. Just saying Merry Christmas to my girl. I say, standing. We open presents. Axel tears through wrapping paper with 4-year-old enthusiasm. Breyer dozes in her chair, too weak to participate. Caspian takes photos, posts them to social media. Look at our Christmas morning prayers for my beautiful wife. I watch him perform devotion with disturbing authenticity and wonder how many people believe it. How many people see his posts and think what a good man staying with his sick wife when he could have left. Axel holds up a toy truck, showing it to his mother. She barely responds. Mommy's tired, buddy, Caspian says gently. She needs her rest. Around 11, I stand to leave. Axel runs to the door with me, tugging my sleeve. Grandpa, he whispers, looking up at me with those innocent eyes. Will the doctor make Mommy better? The question stops me cold. I look at this child who's normalized his mother's illness, who's learned to ask for hope in whispers. I look at Caspian watching us from the living room doorway, his expression unreadable. My grandson asks if his mother will get better, and the man poisoning her says, "Yes, of course, sweetheart. Mommy just needs rest." "Grandpa's trying, buddy," I tell him. "Grandpa's trying." I drive back to my hotel with surveillance footage saved on multiple drives, a notebook full of evidence, and one question burning in my mind. I already have the proof. Video of him mixing compounds, recovered emails showing embezzlement, witness statements from doctors and nurses, the pattern of systematic poisoning and intimidation. What I need now is the why. Not just the money I know about the embezzlement, but why this method? Why 3 years of slow torture instead of something faster? Why the obsessive need to not just silence her, but break her completely? I need to understand the man I'm about to destroy. The answer came faster than I expected. I'm sitting in my car outside Briar's house, still seeing Axel's face at the door, still hearing his whispered question about whether the doctor will make mommy better when my phone rings. "Desmond." "Howard," he says, and his voice has that tone I've learned to recognize. The one that means he found something bad. "I need to tell you something." "Are you sitting down?" "I'm in my car." "What did you find?" "Marriage records. Caspian was married before your daughter." I already knew he was going to say it, but hearing it still hits like a punch. "When?" 6 years ago. Different state, Nevada. Her name was Catherine. Catherine Winters. She died at 31. The same age Briar is now. How did I ask, though I already know? Was alleged sleeping pill overdose, ruled accidental death. But Howard, I got her medical records from the 18 months before she died. Depression, chronic dermatitis, hair loss, severe tremors, cognitive decline. My hands tighten on the steering wheel. Exactly the same, I say. "So exactly the same," Desmond confirms. "Same symptom progression, same timeline." Catherine Winters and Caspian Bell were married for 18 months. Then she died. 18 months. Briar and Caspian have been married for 3 years, but her symptoms only started after Axel was born. After she discovered the embezzlement. After she became inconvenient. "What happened to the first wife's body?" I ask. "Cremated. No autopsy beyond the standard tox screen, which only checked for common sleeping pills and came back positive. Nobody looked for heavy metals or antipsychotics. Why would they? Young woman history of depression, bottles of prescribed medication in her bathroom. Clean case. Except it wasn't," I say. "Except it wasn't," Desmond agrees. "I'm petitioning to reopen the coroner's file, get copies of whatever tissue samples they kept. It's a long shot, but if there's anything left, he killed her, practiced on her, perfected the method, then found Briar." "There's more," Desmond says. "Catherine Winters had money. Not as much as your daughter, but significant. Life insurance policy worth $500,000. Small tech startup she'd inherited from her father. Caspian was the beneficiary. After her death, he cashed out everything within 3 months. And then he found Briar," I say quietly. "Wealthy, successful, running a company worth millions." Exactly. "Howard, I think your daughter wasn't chosen randomly. I think he targets women with assets, marries them, and then he doesn't finish. He doesn't need to." I sit in that car for a long time, after we hang up watching Christmas lights twinkle in Briar's windows, thinking about a woman named Catherine Winters, who died 6 years ago at 31. Who suffered for 18 months the same way my daughter has suffered. Who died believing she was mentally ill when she was actually being murdered. Briar wasn't his first victim. She was his refinement. Before I show you what Desmond found in those chemical records, are you still with me? Comment A if this was about money, or B if it was something darker. Add one reason in 5 to 10 words. Quick note, the next part includes fictionalized details for emotional impact. The lesson is what matters. The next morning, December 26th. I meet Desmond at his office. He spread procurement records across his desk, documents obtained through a contact at a chemical supply company, a shell entity. Desmond explains, pointing to the company name on the invoices. Registered in Delaware. Caspian's the only officer. He's been ordering compounds for 3 years. He slides the first invoice toward me. My hands shake as I read. Haloperidol, 5 grams. Ordered quarterly for 3 years. Organic lid derivatives, 10 grams. Same pattern. And then the compound that makes my blood run cold. DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide. 1-liter bottles. Ordered every other month. DMSO, could I say? I know that compound. We used it in pharmaceutical development. Tell me what it does, Desmond says. It carries other compounds through the skin barrier, I say. Anything dissolved in DMSO absorbs transdermally at a dramatically higher rate. You don't need ingestion, just contact. I set the invoice down. He was ordering it in bulk every other month for 3 years. That's not a cosmetic ingredient. That's a production schedule. Desmond nods slowly. So the cream was always the weapon. The water bottle was theater, I say. Something clean and obvious in case anyone got suspicious enough to test it. Where does a chemical engineer learn to turn skin cream into a delivery system for heavy metals? Still, there's one more thing, Desmond says. He slides another folder across the desk. I tracked Caspian's professional history. Before he met Breyer, he worked for a pharmaceutical compounding lab. 18 months. I stare at the employment record. 18 months. The exact length of time his first marriage lasted. The exact length of time it took Catherine Winters to die. He didn't just learn the method there, I say slowly. He planned the timeline. 18 months to perfect the compounds, test the dosages, document the progression. Then he applied that knowledge to his first wife. When she died, he had a proven formula. And when he married Breyer, Desmond adds, he already knew exactly what to do. The only difference was he waited longer this time. Let her have the baby first. Waited for the right trigger. The embezzlement discovery, I say. January 15th, 2022. She found the missing money. 3 days later, symptoms began. He'd been ready all along, just waiting for the moment he needed to silence her. Desmond leans back in his chair. This isn't amateur hour, Howard. This is systematic, methodical. Someone who's done this before and will do it again if we don't stop him. Understanding that Caspian had perfected his method over 18 months at a pharmaceutical lab explained how he poisoned my daughter. But it didn't explain why he chose this particular cruelty. Why slow torture instead of something faster? That afternoon, I asked Dr. Gomez if she could help me understand the psychology behind it. Her question stops me cold. Mr. Myers, do you understand the difference between wanting someone dead and needing them broken first? We're sitting in her consultation room at the medical building downtown. She's pulled files on similar cases, domestic abusers, who use systematic psychological and chemical control to destroy their victims. I'm not sure I do, I admit. Most people who kill for money choose efficiency, Dr. Gomez explains. Accident, sudden illness, something that looks natural but happens quickly. They want the inheritance, the insurance payout, the assets. The victim's death is a means to an end. She leans forward, her expression grave. Tikam, but what Caspian did to Breyer and to his first wife, that's not about efficiency. That's about power. Control. The systematic erasure of another person's autonomy and identity. You're saying the money was secondary? I'm saying he didn't want her money first. He wanted her surrender. The money was the bonus he collected after he'd already achieved his real goal, complete psychological subjugation. She pulls out a clinical profile she's been building based on all the evidence Desmond and I have gathered. Coercive control disorder, she says. It's in the DSM-5. Individuals with this pathology derive their primary satisfaction not from the material gains, but from the process of breaking another person. They target strong, independent, successful individuals precisely because those are the traits they want to destroy. I think about Breyer before the symptoms started. Brilliant, independent, running a company her mother built, making her own decisions, living her own life. She was the ultimate target, I say slowly. Exactly. A woman with money is useful, but a woman with money and strength and autonomy, that's the prize. Because every day he made her weaker every time she forgot something, or couldn't hold her coffee cup, or needed him to speak for her, that was the real victory. Watching her dependency grow, watching her light dim, my daughter wasn't a victim of greed. She was the trophy in a sick game of dominance. The slow method wasn't a bug, Dr. Gomez continues. It was the point. He needed time. Time to watch her break. Time to be the devoted husband everyone admired. Time to photograph her decline and post about it on social media, collecting sympathy and praise for his patience. He was performing, I say. He was winning. Every doctor's appointment where he spoke for her, every family gathering where she sat silent and confused, every time someone told him he was such a good man for staying, that fed the pathology. The financial payoff was going to be the cherry on top of 3 years of systematic domination. Can you testify to this? I ask. In court. Absolutely. This profile doesn't mitigate criminal culpability. If anything, it demonstrates premeditation and sadistic intent. Men like this don't stop until their victim is completely erased, or until someone stops them. I leave Dr. Gomez's office with a fuller understanding of the monster who married my daughter. And I drive to Breyer's house to check on her, knowing Caspian won't be home until after 7. Breyer is sleeping in her wheelchair by the window, the late afternoon sun, making her look almost peaceful. The effects of stopping the daily poisoning are subtle but real. Her breathing seems easier, her color slightly better. Axel is playing with building blocks in the living room. He looks up when I enter, his face brightening. Grandpa, I sit on the floor with him, helping build a tower, trying to be present for my grandson, while my mind races through everything I've learned. Then Axel runs to his father's study and returns carrying something. Grandpa, I found this in Daddy's drawer. It looks like Mommy's cream. He holds out a small white tube, identical branding to the cream jar on Breyer's bathroom counter. But when I look closer, my hands start shaking. The batch number on the bottom is different from the one in the bathroom. The font on the label is slightly misaligned, as if printed on a home printer rather than professionally manufactured. Shy Daddy told me never ever to touch it, Axel says, watching my face. Why can't I touch it, Grandpa? 'Cause it's special medicine, I say carefully, my mind already cataloging this as evidence. That's very good, buddy. Can Grandpa keep this safe for you? Axel nods and goes back to his blocks. I turn the tube over in my hands. It's not from the bathroom. This is from Caspian's desk drawer, a drawer I assume he keeps locked when he's home. A personal stockpile, custom packaged compound, proving this isn't accidental contamination or pharmacy error. This is deliberate, methodical, criminal intent in a cream tube small enough to fit in a child's palm. A child's curiosity, a hidden drawer, evidence that will end a monster. I seal the tube in an evidence bag from the kit Desmond gave me carefully, documenting where and when it was found. Axel watches with innocent interest, then returns to his toys, having no idea he just handed us proof that could send his father to prison for the rest of his life. My phone buzzes. Text from Desmond. Lab results back. You need to see this tonight. I look at Breyer sleeping in her wheelchair, at Axel building towers on the floor, at the evidence bag in my pocket, containing Caspian's personal poison stockpile. The toxicology doesn't just prove what's in the cream. It proves how long he's been using it. And we have 2 days until December 28th, the day Caspian plans to institutionalize Breyer and take control of everything she owns. 2 days to make sure that never happens. That evening, sitting in my hotel room with Axel's cream tube sealed in an evidence bag beside me, my phone rings. Dr. Gomez's voice on the phone is calm, clinical, final. Mr. Myers, the state lab certified the results. This is now a criminal matter. I sit down heavily on the bed, feeling the weight of those words. Tell me. The samples I collected from Breyer during the initial examination: skin swabs, hair follicles, residual cream from beneath her fingernails. The state forensic lab completed full analysis: haloperidol, dimethyl sulfoxide, organic lead compounds. The ratios are precise, Howard. Calculated to prevent immediate lethality while inducing a chemical coma that mimics severe psychiatric breakdown. It's deliberate, I say. This wasn't experimentation. This was formula. Someone with chemical knowledge designed these exact concentrations to achieve specific neurological effects while avoiding obvious markers of poisoning. The toxicologist said whoever created this compound knew exactly what they were doing. I think about Caspian's 18 months at the pharmaceutical compounding lab, his notebook filled with calculations. 3 years of methodical dosing. What happens now, I ask? Under Oregon state law, I'm a mandatory reporter. When a medical professional has reasonable cause to believe a vulnerable adult is being abused, we're legally required to report to law enforcement. I filed the report 2 hours ago. Adult Protective Services and Portland Police Major Crimes Unit have been notified. The private investigation just became official. Mr. Myers, you've handed them a prosecutable attempted murder case. The evidence is substantial. Surveillance footage, chemical procurement records, witness statements, medical documentation, and now certified forensic toxicology from an accredited state laboratory. How long until they act? Detective assigned to the case wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. Bring everything: Desmond's files, the video evidence, all of it. They'll need to move fast. Caspian's planned transport date is December 28th, correct? 9 a.m. Then we have less than 2 days. I'll be at the meeting tomorrow. 10 o'clock, your family attorney's office. 3 years of watching my daughter disappear. 3 days to bring her back. The next morning, December 27th, I arrive at Margaret Larson's office carrying everything we've collected. Margaret has been our family attorney for 15 years. She handled my late wife's estate, the trust documents, the company incorporation. She's known Breyer since she was 20 years old. She's also the one who drafted that middle name clause in Edna's durable power of attorney. The clause that makes Caspian's signed guardianship papers worthless. Detective Robert Hayes from Portland Police Major Crimes Unit is already there when I arrive. He's younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and the methodical manner of someone who builds cases that hold up in court. Desmond arrives with his case files. Dr. Gomez brings the medical records and forensic reports. We spread everything across Margaret's conference table. Walk me through it, Detective Hayes says. From the beginning. I tell him about the doctor's office on December 20th. Dr. Gomez's whispered warning. The surveillance cameras. The deleted email. The ex-wife who died identically 6 years ago. The pattern of doctor shopping. The coerced nurse. The Christmas Eve footage of Caspian mixing compounds at 1:30 a.m. Detective Hayes takes notes, asking sharp questions, cross-referencing documents. Desmond presents the chemical procurement records, the shell company, the systematic ordering of compounds over 3 years. Dr. Gomez presents the toxicology reports, the calculated ratios designed to cause specific neurological damage while avoiding immediate lethality. Margaret presents the financial evidence. The embezzlement discovered January 15th, 2022. Symptoms beginning January 18th. The invalid guardianship papers with the missing middle name. The ex-wife's case, Detective Hayes says. Nevada. I'll coordinate with their authorities. If we can reopen that investigation, establish a pattern. 2 victims, same method of operation, Desmond says. Makes this a serial case. Exactly. Detective Hayes closes his notebook. Here's what we have: attempted murder, aggravated assault, medical fraud, embezzlement, witness tampering. Based on this evidence, I have probable cause for an arrest warrant. When I ask, a judge will sign it by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. But here's the question. Do we arrest him now, or do we wait for him to execute his plan? Margaret leans forward. If you arrest him now, he'll claim the guardianship papers were legitimate, that he was trying to get Breyer proper care. His defense will be that this is all a misunderstanding. But if we let him arrive tomorrow morning. Detective Hayes says, with the transport van ready to forcibly remove Breyer to a facility using forged documents. We catch him in the act. I finish. We let him walk in thinking he's won, Detective Hayes says. Then we close the trap. Desmond nods. He shows up with the van, presents the guardianship papers Howard signed with the invalid's signature, attempts to take custody of Breyer against her will. That's kidnapping. Add it to the list. The ex-wife's case will be reopened simultaneously, Detective Hayes says. Nevada authorities are already reviewing the file based on our preliminary report. If they find similar chemical signatures, 2 murder cases, Dr. Gomez says quietly. Same perpetrator, same method, same motive. Margaret looks at me across the table. Mr. Myers, tomorrow morning your daughter gets her life back. The trap is set. The warrant is signed. Tomorrow we end this. Detective Hayes stands. I'll be in position at 8:30 a.m., unmarked car across the street. Mr. Myers, you'll be at the house. I'll be there. Act natural. Let him go through his routine. Present the papers. Start loading Breyer into the van if necessary. The moment he attempts to remove her from the premises against her will, I move in. What about Axel? I ask. The 4-year-old, Detective Hayes' expression softens. Child Protective Services will be on standby. He'll be placed with you temporarily until this is resolved. I drive back to my hotel through December rain, rehearsing my role one last time. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, Caspian will arrive at Breyer's house with a transport van and forged guardianship papers. For the first time in 3 years, I won't be playing the clueless old man. Detective Hayes will be in the unmarked car across the street, and my daughter will finally be free. I barely slept that night. By 6:30 a.m. on December 28th, I'm already dressed and driving through the December dawn to Breyer's house. The warrant is signed. The trap is set. In 2.5 hours, this will all be over. December 28th, 7 a.m. I enter Breyer's room expecting to find her sleeping, but her eyes are already open watching the door. She's sitting up in bed, more alert than I've seen her in 3 years. The effects of stopping the daily poisoning are visible now. Her eyes are clearer. Her tremors less severe. Not fully recovered, but present in a way that makes my heart ache with hope. Dad, she says, her voice still weak but steady. I sit on the edge of her bed, taking her hand. Some people are coming to the house today, sweetheart. I tell her quietly. I need you to stay in this room until I come get you. Can you do that for me? She looks at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. Then something shifts in her expression, understanding, recognition, maybe even relief. Dad, I know. 2 words, but they carry the weight of 3 years. And you know what, sweetheart? I know something's wrong. With Caspian, with me. I can't remember everything clearly, but I know. Her hand tightens on mine. Sometimes I'd wake up and know he'd done something while I was sleeping, changed something, but I couldn't hold on to the thought long enough to... She trails off exhausted by the effort of forming coherent sentences. Oh, it's okay, I tell her. You don't have to explain. Just stay here this morning. Trust me. She nods slowly, lying back against the pillows. I trust you, Dad. I kiss her forehead and leave her room, closing the door softly behind me. By 8 o'clock, Dr. Gomez and Margaret Larson arrive together. We position ourselves in the living room, professional but not threatening. Margaret sits in the armchair with her briefcase. Dr. Gomez sits on the sofa with medical files. My phone buzzes. Detective Hayes. In position. Unmarked sedan across the street. I can see the front door. I text back, ready. Everyone knows their role, Margaret says quietly. We wait for him to incriminate himself. Let him present the papers. Let him explain his plan. Don't interrupt. He thinks he's arriving to execute a guardianship transfer, Dr. Gomez adds. Let him believe it. I check my watch. 8:30. 30 minutes. The house is too quiet. I can hear the antique clock in the hallway ticking, counting down seconds. My hands want to shake, but I force them still. 8:45. 8:50. My phone buzzes. Detective Hayes. Vehicle approaching. Dark SUV. Second vehicle behind it, white van. In 90 seconds, the man who poisoned my daughter will walk through that door thinking he's won. 2 minutes out, I tell Margaret and Dr. Gomez. Remember, stay calm, let him talk. We take our positions. Margaret reviewing documents. Dr. Gomez writing notes in a medical file. Me standing by the window looking out at the rain as if I'm just a worried father waiting for news about his daughter's care. 8:58. I see the SUV pull into the driveway. The white transport van parks behind it on the street. Professional medical transport service probably hired under false pretenses. Caspian steps out of the SUV. Sharp suit, leather briefcase. He checks his watch, always punctual, and walks toward the front door. 9 o'clock exactly. The doorbell rings. I open it. Dad, Caspian says with that warm smile. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I know this is difficult. He steps inside, shaking rain from his coat. Then he sees Dr. Gomez and Margaret Larson seated in the living room. He pauses. Just a fraction of a second. The smile freezes and something flickers behind his eyes, calculation, reassessment. Then the composure snaps back into place. What a pleasant surprise, he says smoothly, walking into the living room. Dr. Gomez, I didn't realize you'd be joining us. And Ms. Larson, of course. I'm glad we have medical and legal professionals here to review the transition plan. This makes everything more official. He sets his briefcase on the coffee table with practiced ease. So I have all the necessary documentation, of course. He continues opening the briefcase. The facility is excellent private specialized care for severe psychiatric conditions. They're expecting Breyer at noon today. Margaret watches him with professional neutrality. Perhaps you could walk us through the paperwork, Mr. Bell. Certainly. Caspian pulls out a folder. Medical transfer authorization, signed by Breyer's primary physician, financial arrangements for long-term care, and of course the temporary guardianship authorization signed by Howard as next of kin. He slides the documents toward Margaret. I watch his hands, the same hands that mixed poison at 1:30 a.m. on Christmas morning. The same hands that applied toxic cream to my daughter's skin twice daily for 3 years. The same hands that forged signatures and intimidated witnesses and systematically destroyed a woman's mind to steal her fortune. I know this is hard for everyone, Caspian says, his voice full of false sympathy. But Breyer's condition has deteriorated to the point where home care is no longer safe. The specialists agree that institutionalization is the only responsible option. 3 years of horror, and he's still smiling. Margaret picks up the guardianship document, studies it carefully, looks at the signature Howard Myers missing the middle name that would make it valid. Mr. Bell, she says, her voice calm and professional. Before we proceed, there's something you should know. Caspian's smile doesn't waver. Of course. Margaret sets the document down and looks him directly in the eye. You're under arrest. Task 5.2. Caspian's smile doesn't falter when Margaret speaks the word arrest, but I see his fingers tighten on the briefcase handle. I'm sorry, he says, his voice still smooth. I don't understand. Yes, you do, Margaret says calmly. She stands, moving to the door. Detective Hayes enters from outside, shield clipped to his belt, the weight of authority filling the room. Mr. Caspian Bell. Detective Hayes says, I'm Detective Robert Hayes, Portland Police Major Crimes Unit. I have a warrant for your arrest. Caspian looks from Detective Hayes to Margaret to me. The smile is still there, but it's frozen now, a mask instead of an expression. This is absurd. On what charges? Attempted murder, aggravated assault, medical fraud, embezzlement, witness tampering. Would you like me to continue? I step forward and place a folder on the coffee table. Then another. then another. Evidence collected over 8 days that felt like years. Certified state forensic toxicology reports. Dr. Gomez says opening the first folder. Skin swabs, hair samples, tissue analysis, haloperidol, dimethyl sulfoxide, organic lead compounds, mixed with precision and delivered transdermally through cream, applied twice daily for 3 years. She slides the report toward Caspian. Margaret opens the second folder. Financial records. Unauthorized transfers totaling $2.3 million from Breyer's company accounts to a shell entity registered in your name. Documented embezzlement beginning January 2022. She sets a second document beside it. And this the guardianship authorization you had Howard sign 4 days ago. You'll notice the signature reads, Howard Myers, not Howard Eugene Myers, under the durable power of attorney established by Edna Catherine Myers in 2008. Any family authorization missing the full legal name is void. These papers are worthless, Mr. Bell. They always were. Detective Hayes opens his laptop. Surveillance footage from December 25th, 1:30 a.m. He turns the screen toward Caspian. The footage plays. Christmas Eve night. Caspian in the kitchen alone in the dark measuring compounds with a precision scale, consulting his calculation notebook, mixing the poison that would keep my daughter sedated and confused for another 24 hours. Caspian watches the screen, his face unreadable. We have 18 hours of footage, Detective Hayes says. 3 different cameras, documented evidence of you preparing and administering toxic compounds. I pick up the final folder. The one Desmond compiled from Nevada, the Catherine Winters. I say quietly. Your first wife. Died at 31 after 18 months of marriage. Depression, chronic dermatitis, hair loss, severe tremors, cognitive decline. I drop the folder on the table. It didn't start with Breyer. You did this before. 2 wives, same poison, same method, same man. For the first time, Caspian's smile vanishes. Something cold moves behind his eyes. Like you can't prove. We already have, Dr. Gomez interrupts. Nevada authorities reopened Catherine Winters' case based on our evidence. They found preserved tissue samples from her autopsy. Same chemical signatures. Same compound ratios. Same transdermal delivery method. You killed your first wife, Mr. Bell, and you almost killed your second. Caspian stands abruptly. This is harassment. A conspiracy of a grieving old man who can't accept that his daughter is mentally ill. I've done nothing but care for Breyer, so you poisoned her. I say, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. You discovered she found your embezzlement. You knew she was going to divorce you and remove you from the company. So you started poisoning her to make her appear incompetent, to steal her inheritance, to erase her. Detective Hayes steps forward. Mr. Bell, I'm placing you under arrest. The warrant was signed by a circuit court judge at 7:58 this morning. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. You have nothing. Caspian's voice rises, the mask finally cracking. You're just a lonely, grieving old man trying to rationalize your daughter's insanity. She's sick. She's been sick for years. Everyone knows it. Everyone's seen it. You think any judge will believe your paranoid conspiracy theories over 3 years of documented medical decline. He's looking at me now, and I see what's been hidden behind that patient smile for 3 years. Not love, not even greed, just cold, calculating contempt. She's weak, Caspian says quietly. She always was. Brilliant, yes. Successful, yes. But fundamentally weak. Easy to break. Easy to... The bedroom door opens. Breyer stands in the doorway. She's trembling, leaning against the frame for support. Her hair is uncombed. She's wearing the same pajamas she's worn for days, but her eyes are clear, focused. present. She's standing. Caspian's face goes white. "Briar," he says, and for the first time I hear genuine fear in his voice. "Sweetheart, go back to bed." "You're not well?" "No," Briar says. Her voice is weak but steady. She takes a step forward, then another. "I'm not going back to bed." She walks across the living room. Every step requires effort. But she doesn't stop until she's standing directly in front of her husband. Caspian stares at her, his composure finally shattered. The woman he spent 3 years breaking is standing in front of him, whole enough to look him in the eye. "You don't get to make me crazy anymore," Briar says. 7 words. Quiet, firm, final. The room falls silent. My daughter is standing. And she is free. Detective Hayes moves forward with handcuffs. "Caspian Bell, you're under arrest." The metal clicks shut around Caspian's wrists with a sound like closure. He tries to say something, some final manipulation, some last attempt at control. But Briar has already turned away from him. She's walking toward me, and I catch her as her legs give out, holding her up the way a father should. Detective Hayes leads Caspian toward the door. Caspian turns back once, trying to find the confident smile, but it's gone. There's nothing left but a man in handcuffs being led to a police car. Briar is standing beside me, her hand in mine, watching him leave. Outside, I hear car doors open. The sound of justice 3 years late. The door closed behind Detective Hayes and his officers at 9:47 p.m. The house felt different without Caspian in it, like a theater after the audience leaves, still holding the shape of what just happened, but suddenly startlingly quiet. Axel stood in the hallway near his bedroom door, clutching the stuffed elephant Briar had given him for his 3rd birthday. His dark eyes, Briar's eyes, not Caspian's, moved from his mother to me and back again. "Where did Daddy go?" His voice was small, uncertain, in a way that made my chest ache. Briar knelt slowly, her movements still careful, still testing the limits of her own body after years of being told it was failing. She reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Axel's ear with a tenderness I hadn't seen her use in months, maybe years. "And Daddy had to go away for a while," she said softly. "But Mommy is right here. Is Daddy coming back?" The question hung in the air between them. I watched Briar's face, watched her choose her words with the same precision I'd used choosing evidence to present to Caspian an hour earlier. "Not for a very long time," she said. "But you know what? You have Mommy and you have Grandpa Howard, and we both love you so much." Axel processed this with the strange acceptance children have when their world shifts. He'd been living in chaos, disguised as normal for his entire short life. Maybe this new configuration didn't feel much different to him. Maybe it felt better, even if he couldn't articulate why. Can I have hot chocolate?" he asked. Briar laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected that I felt something crack open in my chest. "Yes, sweetheart, you can have hot chocolate." She stood and took his hand, leading him toward the kitchen. Over her shoulder, she looked back at me. "Will you stay?" I should have said yes. I should have stayed in that penthouse with them, should have helped Briar make hot chocolate and tuck Axel into bed and begin the long, difficult process of healing. But I couldn't. "Not yet. I need to go home," I said quietly. "Just for tonight. I'll come back first thing in the morning, I promise." She nodded like she understood, even though I wasn't sure I understood it myself. I walked out through the front door into the December night. My reflection caught briefly in the dark window of my car looked older than I remembered, or maybe I was just finally seeing what 3 years of obsession had carved into my face. The December night was cold when I stepped outside, the kind of cold that reaches through your coat and settles in your bones. I walked the 4 blocks to where I'd parked my car, and with each step I waited to feel something. Relief, satisfaction. The righteous vindication of a father who'd saved his daughter from a monster. But what haunted me instead was a question I couldn't silence. What if I'd seen it sooner? I drove home on autopilot, barely registering the familiar turns. My house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Edna had kept the porch light on for me every night for 31 years, right up until the stroke took her. I'd never started doing it for myself. Inside, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the dark living room to my study and sat in the leather chair I'd spent countless hours in over the past 3 years. The monitors were still there, dark screens reflecting nothing. The hard drive with 3 years of surveillance footage sat in the locked drawer of my desk. For 3 years, every evening had followed the same pattern. Review footage, document incidents, build the case. Every single night, I'd known exactly what I needed to do next. Tonight I had nothing. I should have felt free. The mission was complete. Caspian was in custody facing charges that would put him away for the rest of his life. Briar was safe. Axel was safe. Everything I'd worked for had come to pass exactly as I'd planned. So why did I feel so empty? Edna used to say that revenge and justice weren't the same thing, that one fed the soul while the other just filled the space where the soul used to be. I'd argued with her about it once years ago, back when the distinction seemed purely philosophical. Sitting in the dark, I finally understood what she meant. I hadn't done this for justice. I'd done it because I couldn't do it for Catherine Winters, 23 years ago, couldn't save a woman I'd never met from a monster I hadn't known existed. I'd done it because my daughter had been slipping away and I was desperate enough to break every rule I'd lived by to pull her back. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight. December 29th. Tomorrow would be December 30th. Then December 31st. Then a new year, the 1st January in 3 years, where I wouldn't wake up already knowing how I'd spend every minute. I thought about Caspian sitting in a holding cell right now, probably still trying to calculate his way out, still believing his intelligence could overcome the evidence stacked against him. I thought about Briar and Axel in that penthouse, maybe finally sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. And I thought about Edna, about how she'd look at me if she could see what I'd become in her absence. Would she be proud, disappointed, heartbroken that I'd survived her but lost myself in the process? My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to pick it up. I opened my messages and typed, "I'm proud of you. Get some rest. I'll be there at 8 a.m. Briar's response came through 30 seconds later. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Dad." I sat in the dark and finally let myself cry, not for what I'd done, but for all the years we'd lost while I was too blind to see what Caspian really was. The sobs came from somewhere deep, somewhere I'd kept locked away since Elena died, since Briar married a monster, since I'd realized my daughter's illness was manufactured by the man who promised to love her. When the tears finally stopped, I was exhausted, hollowed out. But maybe that was necessary. Maybe you had to empty yourself completely before you could start to fill back up with something real. Tomorrow, I'd go back to the penthouse. I'd help Briar and Axel navigate whatever came next. I'd testify at Caspian's trial and watch him face consequences for every calculated cruelty. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I had absolutely no idea what tomorrow would actually bring, and somehow that felt like the first honest thing I'd experienced in a very long time. Tomorrow came. Each morning I woke up without a mission, felt strange, like forgetting to carry something heavy I'd been holding for years. January 8th, 2026. I sat in the gallery of Multnomah County Courthouse and watched my son-in-law stand before a circuit judge in an orange jumpsuit. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, plain wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and the seal of the United States mounted behind the bench where Judge Thomas Caldwell presided. He was a stern man in his early 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, carrying the efficient detachment of someone who'd seen every variation of human depravity. Caspian stood at the defense table beside Margaret Larson. His posture was perfect, shoulders back, chin level, but the orange jumpsuit undermined whatever dignity he was trying to project. "Mr. Bell," Judge Caldwell said, his voice carrying easily through the quiet room. "You've been charged with attempted murder in the first degree, aggravated assault, medical fraud, embezzlement, and witness tampering. How do you plead to these charges as read?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Caspian said. His voice was calm, controlled, exactly the same voice he'd used to convince my daughter she was losing her mind. Margaret Larson stepped forward. "Your Honor, we'd like to address the matter of bail. Mr. Bell has deep ties to the community, no prior criminal record, and—" "Or Your Honor," a new voice cut in smoothly. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Mitchell rose from the prosecution table, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 40s with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and the kind of crisp authority that filled a room. Given the severity of the charges, the defendant's substantial financial resources, and the ongoing homicide investigation regarding the death of the defendant's first wife, Catherine Winters, the government opposes bail on the grounds that Mr. Bell presents both a flight risk and a danger to the community. The words hung in the air. Ongoing homicide investigation. I watched Caspian's shoulders tense almost imperceptibly. He'd known this was coming, but hearing it stated in open court was different. Official. Irreversible. Judge Caldwell looked down at the papers before him, then back up at Caspian. Bail is denied. Trial date is set for April 15, 2026. The defendant will remain in federal custody until that time. Margaret Larson tried once more. Your Honor, if we could discuss the possibility of a plea arrangement. The government is not interested in a plea arrangement, Rachel Mitchell said flatly. We intend to prosecute this case to its fullest extent. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. I sat in the gallery and looked up at the court seal behind the judge's bench. The system was far from perfect. I'd spent 3 years working around it, because I couldn't trust it to protect my daughter. But today, watching Caspian led back to holding in handcuffs, I thought maybe it could still work when you gave it the right evidence. Trial date April 15th. 3 months away. 3 months to watch my daughter remember how to be herself. The recovery doctor Iris Gomez had warned me would be neither quick nor linear. She'd been right. January through March became a strange new routine. Every morning, I drove to the neurological rehabilitation facility in Lake Oswego, where Breyer spent her weekdays working with occupational therapists, speech pathologists, and cognitive specialists. Some days were good. She'd recognize me, immediately ask coherent questions about Axel, make jokes that sounded like the daughter I remembered. Other days were harder. She'd stare at familiar objects like she'd never seen them before, struggle to find words for simple concepts, or tire so completely after 20 minutes that she'd need to sleep for hours. 3 years of neurotoxic exposure. Dr. Gomez explained during one of our weekly consultations in early February. Doesn't undo itself overnight. The neural pathways will rebuild. But it takes time, patience, and consistency. So I was consistent. Every morning, I brought her coffee, prepared exactly as she'd loved it during college, back when we'd meet at that cafe near Portland State, and she'd tell me about her chemistry classes and her plans for the future. 2 raw sugars and a splash of cream. The same way every single day. One morning in mid-February, she took the cup from my hands and looked at it with sudden focus. Dad, why do you make my coffee this way? I sat down beside her bed. Because this is how you loved it. And I remember even when you can't. She cried, then, not the confused, frustrated tears that sometimes came when her mind wouldn't cooperate, but something deeper. Grief for the years she'd lost, maybe. Or relief that someone had been keeping track of who she really was while Caspian tried to erase it. The memory gaps remained. Whole sections of the past 3 years were simply gone, and Dr. Gomez said they might never come back. But the core cognitive function steadily improved. By March, Breyer could read for an hour without losing focus. She remembered Axel's routine, helped him with his bedtime stories, laughed at his 4-year-old jokes. The tremors came and went. Some mornings her hands shook too badly to hold the coffee cup. Other mornings she was steady. I learned to bring it anyway, to sit with her whether she could drink it or not. Dr. Gomez had used the word rehabilitation, like it was a destination you could reach if you followed the right map. But sitting with Breyer through those 3 months, I started to understand it wasn't about getting back to some previous version of herself. It was about building something new from what remained pieces of who she'd been before Caspian. pieces of who she'd become, surviving him, pieces of who she was choosing to be now. Some mornings she remembered why the coffee mattered. Some mornings she didn't. I brought it anyway. By late March, Briar was strong enough to sit in the living room for full mornings watching Axel play with his blocks, while weak spring sunlight filtered through the windows. She'd gained back some of the weight she'd lost, and the hollows under her eyes had started to fill in. One Thursday afternoon, she looked at me with sudden clarity, the kind of sharp focus I hadn't seen in years. "Dad," she said, "what happened to the company?" I paused, coffee cup halfway to my lips. We hadn't talked about that yet. But she was ready now. I set the coffee cup down on the side table and took a breath. "The company," I said carefully, "is still yours. It always was. But we need to fix some things Caspian did while you were sick." She nodded slowly, that new clarity still sharp in her eyes. "Can we do that?" "Yes," I said, "we can." February 12th, 2026. I sat across from Briar in the corporate attorney's office and watched her read the asset recovery documents with hands that no longer trembled. Jonathan Spencer, the corporate attorney handling the business restoration, was a methodical man in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades untangling complex financial fraud. He'd laid out the documents in neat stacks across his conference table, each one representing a piece of what Caspian had tried to steal. "The key," Jonathan said, tapping a finger on the durable power of attorney Edna had drafted 3 years before her stroke, "is this clause right here. Your mother required her middle name, Catherine, to be included in any signature authorizing financial transfers or business decisions." Briar leaned forward, reading the language her mother had written. I watched her face as she processed it. "That every signature Caspian forged," Jonathan continued, "was executed as Briar E. Bell. He used your middle initial, but not the full middle name. According to the terms of this document, that renders every single transfer invalid." The silence in the room was profound. "All of them?" Briar asked quietly. "All of them," Jonathan confirmed. "The embezzled assets totaling $2.3 million have been frozen. Full recovery is already in progress. The business ownership was never legally transferred because the authorizing signatures don't meet the documentary requirements. Your mother built in a failsafe, and it worked perfectly." I thought about Edna in those final months before the stroke, her mind still sharp, even as her body began failing. She'd known something wasn't right about Caspian. She'd tried to warn me, tried to warn Briar. When we didn't listen, she'd done the only thing she could. She'd protected her daughter from beyond the grave. The plan worked. "So the company is mine," Briar said, not quite a question. "The company is yours," Jonathan said. "It always was. We're just making the documentation reflect that reality." Briar signed the restoration papers with her full legal name, Briar Elizabeth Bell, middle name, spelled out in her still recovering but steady handwriting. 3 days later, I drove her to the company headquarters for the first time in 18 months. The building was smaller than I remembered, a modest 2-story structure in an industrial park near the river, with Edna's original logo still painted on the glass front doors. Winter's Organic Cosmetics. The company Edna had built from nothing, formulating products in our garage and selling them at farmers' markets until the business grew beyond our wildest expectations. Briar stood in the parking lot for a long moment, just looking at the building. "Do you think I can do this, Dad?" she asked quietly. I turned to look at her. Really look at her. The hollows under her eyes had filled in. The tremors had mostly stopped. The fog that had clouded her thoughts for 3 years was lifting day by day, revealing the brilliant woman I'd always known she was. "Your mother built this from scratch," I said. "You're just taking back what's yours?" She smiled then, small but genuine, and walked through those glass doors like she was coming home. 10 days later, on a quiet February afternoon, I sat in the living room of Briar's house with Axel on my lap. We were watching cartoons, something involving talking animals and improbable adventures that only made sense in the logic of children's programming. Axel was content, his small body warm against my chest, his stuffed elephant tucked under one arm. The house was peaceful. Briar was upstairs resting after her first full week back at the company. Everything felt for the first time in years almost normal. Then Axel shifted in my lap and looked up at me with those dark, serious eyes. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "where did Daddy go?" The question hung in the air between us. I could have deflected. Could have said something vague about Daddy being away, Daddy having to take care of some things, Daddy coming back someday. The comfortable lies adults tell children to protect them from difficult truths. But I'd spent 3 years watching lies destroy my daughter. I wasn't going to start Axel's life with them. I held him a little closer and chose simple truth. "Daddy did some bad things," I said gently, "and he has to take responsibility for them." Axel was quiet for a moment, processing this with the strange clarity children sometimes have. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay, Grandpa," he said, and turned back to his cartoons. I sat there holding him, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, and thought about all the conversations we'd have in the years ahead. Someday when he was older, I'd tell him the rest. About the poison and the gaslighting and the systematic destruction of his mother's mind. About the grandmother he never met who'd protected his mother even after death. About the price of loving someone who sees you as a tool rather than a person. But for now, at 4 years old, this was enough. Taking responsibility. The simplest truth. The one I'd give him until he was old enough to understand the rest. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Briar. It was a photo her standing in front of the reception desk at Winter's Organic Cosmetics, the company logo, the one Edna had designed 20 years ago, visible behind her. She was smiling, really smiling, in a way I hadn't seen in years. The caption read, "First day back. Mom would be proud." I stared at those 4 words for a long time, feeling something crack open in my chest that had been sealed shut since Edna died. Then I typed back, "She is." That night, I slept better than I had in years. March 2026. I stood on the porch of Briar's new cottage watching my grandson chase seagulls on Cannon Beach, and for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. Briar had sold the house in Lake Oswego 2 weeks earlier. She'd done it quickly, efficiently, the way she used to handle business decisions before Caspian. The realtor had been surprised at the price reduction she'd accepted just to close fast, but I understood. That house had been the venue of 3 years of systematic torment. No amount of money was worth keeping it. The cottage she'd bought instead was small, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened onto a garden and windows that faced the ocean. But it had something the old house never had. "Ma, this house has light, Dad," Briar had said when she'd first shown it to me. The other one never had light. She was right. Even on overcast days, the cottage seemed to glow. I'd helped her move in over a weekend in mid-March, carrying boxes and assembling furniture, while Axel explored tide pools with the fearless curiosity of a 4-year-old discovering a new world. Briar had sorted through her belongings with ruthless efficiency, discarding anything that reminded her of the years with Caspian. But she'd kept 1 box from the old house, the things that had belonged to Edna. I found her in the bedroom unpacking it, holding something small and silver in her hands. Edna's bracelet. The delicate one she'd worn constantly in the years before her stroke, the one I'd put in storage after she died, because looking at it hurt too much. Briar turned it over in her fingers, studying the worn silver links. "Do you remember when Dr. Gomez first examined me?" she asked quietly. She said there was 1 small patch of skin on my left wrist that looked completely normal. No inflammation, no breakdown, no damage at all. I remembered. That tiny detail had been the first crack in Caspian's perfect facade. "Trial, this bracelet," Briar continued, fastening it around her left wrist, "covered that exact spot. Mom wore it every single day, and when she gave it to me before the wedding, she made me promise to never take it off." The implication settled over me slowly then, all at once. The bracelet had shielded that 1 patch of skin from the poisoned cosmetics. Edna had suspected something, maybe not the full scope of what Caspian would become, but something. She'd protected her daughter the only way she could. Mom protected me the only way she could, Briar said softly, echoing my thoughts. She knew something was wrong, I said. She just couldn't prove it yet. Briar nodded and kept the bracelet on. I saw her touch it sometimes in the days that followed, a small gesture of connection to the mother who'd tried to warn us all. A week later, on a quiet March morning, I stood in the cottage kitchen making coffee, while Briar worked at the small table reviewing quarterly reports from the company. The garden outside the window was starting to bloom early spring flowers pushing through the coastal soil. I prepared her coffee the way I'd been making it for months now. 2 raw sugars, splash of cream. The ritual that had marked every morning of her recovery. I set the cup in front of her, and she took it absently, still reading a spreadsheet, and lifted it to her lips. She took a sip, paused, looked up at me with a slight frown. "Dad," she said, "you put way too much sugar in this." I stood frozen, the coffee pot still in my hand. "What?" I managed. "Ugh, the coffee," she said, taking another sip and grimacing slightly. "It's way too sweet." "How much sugar did you put in here?" My eyes began to well before I could stop them. "She's back. My daughter is back. Fully, completely, irreversibly back." "Dad, what's wrong?" Briar set down the cup, genuine concern crossing her face. "I just said the coffee was too sweet." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, laughing and crying at the same time. "Nothing, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick. "I'm just really happy." Her taste had returned. The last piece of sensory function damaged by years of neurotoxic exposure had finally healed. She was critiquing my coffee preparation, something she hadn't been able to do since before she married Caspian. She stood and hugged me, and I held my daughter and cried tears of pure joy. I've spent a lot of time over these past months thinking about what happened. About Caspian, about the 3 years I lost watching my daughter disappear, about the price we all paid for trusting the wrong person. I don't hold any active hatred for my former son-in-law. I don't have the energy for it, and hate requires feeding. What I feel instead is something simpler: clarity. Genuine love never requires someone to be broken first. Real love doesn't demand that you lose yourself to prove your devotion. It doesn't ask you to question your sanity, surrender your autonomy, or accept being diminished as the price of being cherished. A man who claims to love his wife by controlling her every breath, her every thought, her very sanity, that isn't love. That is cowardice wearing love's clothes. I lost 3 years watching my daughter disappear. Briar lost more years of her life, months of memory that will never come back, the fundamental sense of safety that comes from trusting your own mind. But my grandson will grow up knowing something important, that when everything seemed lost, when the system failed, and the monster wore a gentle face, his grandfather never stopped fighting, never stopped gathering evidence, never stopped believing in the truth. If you're reading this and something feels wrong, trust that feeling. The truth always leaves a trail. I watch my daughter and grandson walk along the beach at sunset, their laughter carried on the salt air. The most dangerous person is rarely a stranger with a weapon. More often, it's the person you opened the door for, the one you trusted with your heart, the one who smiled at family dinners while measuring poison in the dark. But here's what I learned. The truth always leaves a trail. Always. You just have to be willing to follow it. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The most dangerous person is rarely a stranger. It's the one you opened the door for. Looking back, I wish I'd trusted my instincts sooner. For months, I dismissed what my gut was telling me because Caspian seemed like the perfect son-in-law. Don't make my mistake. When something feels wrong, even if you can't name it, yet trust that feeling. I lost 3 years because I waited for proof instead of acting on what I already knew. Family justice isn't about revenge, it's about refusing to let the truth stay buried. Stories like mine, these dad's revenge stories you hear on Wise Revenge, they're really stories about persistence, about loving someone enough to fight when they can't fight for themselves. I believe God gave me the chemical engineering background I needed to understand what Caspian was doing. The timing, the evidence, even the healthy skin patch, none of it was coincidence. Family justice sometimes takes years, but it's always worth fighting for. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to fight for family justice when no one else believed you? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more dad's revenge stories like this one, please subscribe to Wise Revenge. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. Some details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling and to protect privacy. But the message, the lesson about trust, persistence, and protecting those you love, that's what matters most.